Hi, welcome to another episode of Linux and Open Source Security. And if you look around today, almost all of us, we are doing most of our shopping online. When I was renovating this office, almost everything was ordered online and was delivered to my doorsteps. I didn't go to any physical store. And when we talk about things like Amazon Prime Days or Black Friday, or even pre-orders for things like PlayStation, Xbox, or iPhone, these online retailers, they suddenly did see a surge of traffic that we have not seen before. It creates a unique challenge for these companies to maintain the uptime so that customers do not lose their window when they're trying to make that purchase. Uh, to maintain and keep this mission critical system up to date, it's a daunting job. And today we have with us somebody who has been in those shoes, Archis Gore, CTO of Polyverse. Tell us a bit about your experience at Amazon, because in your previous role, you were responsible for managing uptime for one of the most uptime critical applications in the world, which was Amazon. So let's talk about your work at Amazon.
So what I did at Amazon was I worked in the search operations team. And so what that means is for all the search pages that you see when you're on Amazon.com, you're looking at products or searching by, same day delivery, whatever. I worked in the operations team, and then more specifically, I would plan out the fleet scaling for Q4, which is when Black Friday and Cyber Monday happen, which are arguably the highest traffic days, and we call them peak days, and then throughout up to Christmas. And so my job quite specifically was to be the primary on call and to maintain and manage that fleet so that it would never ever go down on specifically Black Friday and Cyber Monday, in addition to other critical days.
Let's now talk about how you did that, how you managed to kind of maintain the uptime for one of the most uptime critical applications in the world, that which is Amazon.
So my actual college background or educational background is a lot in game theory and reliability analysis. And basically what that means is I can break down the problem for you, right? If a person conducts one transaction, and if during that transaction the program fails, I can't do anything about uptime. But if so long as that one transaction can happen in the code, right, I can then make a million instances of that same code. Even if when they interact, when it's under load, it goes down, I can make sure that there are enough redundancies that can keep the uptime up. And so I had a contract with the people who actually built the code, and I was one of them too, because in Amazon people own what they build. But the contract always was handle one transaction, I'll handle the rest.
If we talk about uptime, or we are talking about expectations for uptime, we always talk about nines, of course, one nine is not even at least you should be 3 or 4 nines. So how many nines were you promising or they were expecting?
I'll actually answer the question in a different way, because, and I actually, by the way, whenever I do consulting, I bring this reliability metric with me. So if you think of an ER, right, it's not important that the ER is up for 364 days a year, right? The ER's mission is to treat emergencies. If those emergencies happen, if all the emergencies happen on the one day that the ER isn't functioning, right, then the ER has 100% downtime. And I know that it's a bit of a brutal measure, but this metric also captures capacity, it captures resourcing, it captures security, it captures everything. And so the way we would measure uptime is how many transactions are attempted and how many of them failed. And that percentage, now I could be very unlucky and I could have like a 5-minute failure at 9 a.m. in the morning, and I would lose a billion transactions, totally miss my goal. I could have a 5-hour failure between midnight and 5 a.m., and I would be very lucky. And so, but what that does is it takes a very customer-centric, mission-centric view of uptime. And then And so that's how we measured it. And so rather than doing nines, we each year, year over year, I would have a stricter goal and an improved goal, right? Because you can never be perfect, but you can always do better. And so typically I would reduce that goal about 40% each year.
And you said that you were not doing nines. So before that, can you also quickly explain to our viewers what these nines matter? When you say 5 9, 6 9, 99% of what it is. Second is that if you are not going by nines, what were you going with?
In a way that the metric that I covered can be translated to nines. So let me get into what nines are. It just, all that it means is if you take a span of time, right, and it's like a 100 days, right? How many days is your website up, or is your service up? And if it is 1 9, what that means is you're you can be down for at most 9%, right? Or actually, sorry, 91%. If you're 2 9s, it means you can be down for 1%. You're up for 99%. And if you're, and so like then you go past the decimal. So 6 9s is, I believe, something like, I actually don't have this off the top of my head, but I do know, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's actually why we always looked in terms of the number of failed transactions, because that captures people more. And I actually always, even in Polyverse, I reprogram my people to not think in terms of nines, because specifically because we talk about this on this podcast a lot, right? Which is the impact matters. If I was an ER and 5 people died, then that is much more important to know than some kind of theoretical 9 9s measure of how many procedures I did.
Right. And nines do make sense when you are looking at SLAs, so that your accountability is low. But other than that, yes, I fully agree with you what you said there. Now, when you are trying to keep things updated, when you're treating it almost like an ER, when do you really get time to patch things? Because patching may also mean some downtime, or there is always a risk for something to break.
Yes. So the biggest nightmare, like literally the hardest thing, and there was one unlucky soul in the team who would do this once a year. So typically what would happen is we would only patch the things that we built. And the other OS, the rest of the thing would kind of, unless there was a crazy critical emergency, we would just not bother patching. And then once a year, we called it a full integration, which means there was one unlucky person who would spend about 3 to 4 months bringing in all the changes in all the software that have happened throughout the last year. And it was hell. I mean, I did that maybe once and 1.5, and then I handed it off to someone else. You should do it once in your life. It's a hell of an experience, but boy, that is a nightmare, because nothing cooperates, right? And the real problem is it's not you. And I've had these conversations even in the open source world. I'm a big argument proponent against monorepos for this reason, is because if you have full control, monorepos are great, right? But all it takes is one third-party person not having updated their dependency to the latest version, and all of your stack is bound to the lowest version, right? And that used to be just hell. And so, okay, so how did we do patching? We did that, and then aside from that, if there was a request, if there was an emergent request, we would go through a smaller version of that exercise, but it was never pleasant.
But you said, so it was more or less like an yearly exercise, and you will draw straws to see whoever gets the smallest straw and the unlucky person. But sometimes there are a lot of security vulnerability. There are a lot of other, it's not about, patching is so, because things are moving so fast, you cannot run an insecure, as we had a discussion earlier, that sometimes security doesn't become priority because you might get attacked versus your downtime, so the risk overweight. So how do you ensure that if there are critical vulnerabilities, that has to be patched. You cannot wait for an unlucky guy.
You're actually hinting on the problem that I was facing that in fact prompted me to go start Polyverse, right? Which is yeah, because if you think about it, one of my core principles. So if we think of like how DevOps evolved from 10 years ago, if you have old copies of PC Mag from 2008, these big companies would build these big mission critical servers. And you had to buy this one big server and it would never go down. And it had these dual redundant power supplies and it has these dual, what do you call them, UPSs, right? But then the software would just fail. And then you were screwed. And then what we did was we said, what if I just assume that machines always fail and one or two few machines out of my fleet are always going to fail? But how can I keep an overall service running, right? We stopped caring about machines. We hadn't quite caught up in the security world to that mindset, which is some of my passwords are going to be compromised. Some of my machines are just going to be compromised, right? When you think of it from that aspect, at that point, you stop thinking of these big, bold patch moves, and you start thinking in terms of, how can I make it such that I don't need to patch as aggressively. That's one, right? But then the other one is how can I make patching easier than not patching? And so both are problems that I did handle, right? I mean, I did my job pretty okay. But Polyverse was started specifically to address that.
Now, when I look at security, this analogy may not be appropriate, but there can be so many analogies. Is that, you don't you're like, hey, no, we don't need a parachute in the plane. We will, if the plane crash or something happened, then we'll figure out do we need parachute or not, right? You don't install a lock in the door thinking, hey, okay, we will get a lock if we get robbed. If you get robbed, there's no point in getting a lock on the door. Similarly, with security, it's not about when you get compromised, because that could not only bring your whole infrastructure down, your data can be stolen, a lot of bad things happen, but sometimes people don't take security seriously because security is something versus when you're talking about new features or things going down, because that can happen. So sometimes people should not look at security as if, it is like when it happens, you are doomed. So can you talk about what role does security play in the big scheme of things? And should companies take security as seriously as they take new features or acquiring new customers?
So, you know what? I'm going to say something very controversial, which no one thinks about, which is, in my experience, 100% of everyone takes security very, very seriously, right? Always. What we see is what they're saying is, I'm not going to let the fact that I'm taking it seriously, let you just come in and make my life miserable. Right? It doesn't mean, it's not an excuse for security companies to have a terrible experience. It's not an excuse for, us to have like shitty login experiences or, terrible cookie experiences or any of those things, right? And that is what people mean, right? If you think of, it's a bad example because there are people who hate vaccines, but everyone does take diseases seriously. That's why we go get vaccinated when we're children. But if back in like the ancient days when we just had to go by, weird medicine, which was just difficult, which had no scientific basis, people probably didn't take it seriously. And so in my view, I have honestly never run into any human being who has not taken security seriously. I have run into millions and millions of people and companies who are crying and saying, that is not an excuse for the security industry to do a bad job.
To a lot of people, security is not an afterthought. They do care about security. But since the way they get the security that they need is so complex and complicated that it becomes a painful experience, not a pleasant experience.
Exactly.
And that is what sometimes discourages them to either embrace the practices or tools that actually ensure security.
Exactly. If you think of secure email, right, it's a great idea, right? PGP works great, but it can be so complicated to even generate a set of self-signed certificates using OpenSSL. Um, those are things that I really worry about and I care about. Those experiences need to be beautiful.
Archis, thank you so much for not only sharing your own journey at Amazon, but also kind of giving us an insider's view that how things looks internally. That you had to draw a straw to find the most unlucky person who is going to do all that work. But the fact is, as you rightly said, that as much as we like to keep things secure, it is a big challenge. I mean, you are, as I was talking to Alex also, and he would say that the bad guys, they have to be right only once, and you have to be right all the time. And you also don't know what are the places there's it's a very big challenge, and it can be daunting, especially when we look at the attack surface is increasing everywhere. So thanks for sharing those insights out of fear, and also how you helped Amazon handle that, and then the challenge that you saw there led to the creation of Polyverse. So I think people should also learn from that as well. That when the life throws you a lemon, either you can turn into lemonade or create a new company, right? That's what your approach is. Awesome. Thank you, Archis, for your time today, and I look forward to talk to you again. Thank you.
Same here. Thank you for having me.